Imagine standing high above a modern, deafening stadium. Below you, 70,000 people are screaming in unison. They are wearing identical colors, their faces painted, their vocal cords tearing as they watch a handful of men chase a ball across a patch of synthetic grass. You look down at this massive, chaotic spectacle, but you don't feel the frenzy. You just feel quiet. For most of your life, when you found yourself at a Super Bowl party or dragged to a sports bar, you've probably felt a subtle, lingering alienation. Society treats a lack of sports knowledge as a social deficit. If you don't know the stats, the trades, or the weekend's outcomes, the assumption is that you lack passion, or that you don't understand camaraderie. But I wonder if that's actually true. What I think might be happening is that you haven't failed to grasp the appeal of the game. I think you've simply pierced the veil of the modern Colosseum. You are looking at the arena not as a participant, but with the detached clarity of an architect watching a population willingly surrender their most valuable resources to a manufactured distraction. It's a Sunday afternoon. You're sitting in a friend's living room. The television is blaring, the room is tense, and someone just threw a coaster at the coffee table because a referee across the country blew a whistle. You take a sip of your water. There's a slight tightness in your jaw, a quiet exhaustion just from being in the room. You watch them and you realize you don't care, not even a little, but you don't say anything. Opting out of sports culture often feels like a violation of the social contract. Historically, the concept of bread and circuses wasn't just a cynical phrase. It was a deliberate civic mechanism. The Roman elite realized that if you give the masses cheap food and highly produced spectacles, you can absorb their excess civic energy. You pacify them by giving them a synthetic war to fight. The environment changed, but the mechanism is still running because we haven't asked it to check itself. Professional sports function as a pressure valve. They offer the illusion of battle without the physical stakes, the illusion of victory without the personal achievement. There's something I came across recently in behavioral psychology that completely reframed how I look at this kind of intense fandom. Research tends to suggest that highly identified sports fans experience genuine physiological stress during games. Their cortisol spikes, their blood pressure rises, and their nervous systems react as if they are in physical danger. Their bodies are responding to a real threat, but the threat is entirely artificial. It's a simulation of survival. When you look closely at this, it reveals a massive biological asymmetry. The fan endures genuine physiological trauma over a game that has absolutely zero impact on their actual life. They suffer ruined weekends, spiked anxiety, and emotional hangovers. And in exchange, the sports franchise executes what is essentially a cortisol harvest. They extract the fans' real neurological energy, their attention, and their money, and convert it directly into billionaire equity. The fan gets a fleeting, artificial high. The owners get generational wealth. You're not doing this on purpose. Well, actually, maybe you are. Maybe your subconscious simply refuses to participate in a system where your emotional stability is outsourced to the athletic performance of complete strangers. By walking away from the screen, you have chosen biological autonomy over a manufactured emotional roller coaster. You are keeping your nervous system for your own life. Of course, the immediate defense of sports is that it builds community, and it does. But we have to look at the specific type of community it builds. Sports offer a default tribe. It is a lazy, low-friction substitute for connection based almost entirely on the random geographic coordinates of your birth. You wear the same colored laundry, you cheer for the same corporate logo, and instantly you belong. But deep down, you probably recognize how fragile that camaraderie actually is. By ignoring sports, you strip away the easiest, most universally accepted icebreaker in modern society. You force yourself into a slightly more difficult path. Without the crutch of the local franchise, you have to build what Stoics might call a forged citadel. You are required to form relationships based on shared values, intellectual alignment, and mutual growth. It's much harder to build a friendship around a shared life philosophy than a shared football team. But when the season ends, the citadel remains. It's Tuesday morning. You are at the office, standing near the coffee machine. Two colleagues are intensely debating a coaching decision from the night before. You nod politely, pour your coffee, and walk back to your desk. You feel a brief flash of isolation, but it passes quickly. Because in that quiet walk back to your desk, you are holding onto something they aren't. Which brings us to the core of it, the third layer down. If ignoring sports isn't a social deficit, and it isn't just an emotional shield to protect your nervous system, what is it? What has this behavior actually become over the years? I think it's the ultimate macroeconomic arbitrage. The average dedicated sports fan spends roughly 300 to 500 hours a year consuming games, listening to commentary, reading articles, and scrolling through fantasy statistics. They spend thousands of dollars on tickets, merchandise, betting, and cable subscriptions. They are investing massive amounts of capital, both temporal and financial, into watching other men achieve their dreams. When you quietly opt out of this ecosystem, you don't just get your Sunday afternoons back. You become a time-billionaire. You reclaim a staggering surplus of wealth. And what you do with that surplus redefines your entire identity. You aren't just a non-fan. You are an individual who has redirected thousands of hours away from a glowing rectangle and into building actual wealth, mastering real-world skills, and maintaining genuine, uninterrupted presence with your family. You have realized that your time is too valuable to be spent cheering for someone else's legacy. You have stopped being a passive spectator in someone else's arena, so you can be the master architect of your own. It's okay to drop the guilt now. You don't need to apologize for not knowing the weekend stats. You don't need to feign interest at the water cooler on Monday morning just to make everyone else feel comfortable with their chosen distraction. You can let them have their games. You'll probably still find yourself at those Super Bowl parties. You'll stand in the kitchen, eating the snacks, listening to the collective roar of the television in the other room. But the next time you hear that deafening scream over a meaningless penalty, you won't feel alienated. You'll just feel a quiet, unshakable sense of ownership over your own life. Send this to someone who quietly walks away when the game turns on. They'll know exactly what it means. We are told that to be a normal part of society, we must sit in the stands and cheer for the ghosts in the arena. But what happens when you realize the doors were never locked? You just walk out,